Want to turn your B-side into your A-side? Well, stick around for today's episode of Life's Potluck Buffet. I'm John Paulus. Thanks for joining me. If you're not familiar with the idea of an A-side and a B-side, let me explain. Oh, you're like, oh, great, John. This is just what I was waiting for. So the A-side is used to refer to the side of a record that was supposed to be the hit song side of a record back in the day when radio stations played records and the disc jockeys would, play the A side of the record, and B sides were usually relegated to just some song that you cut that you were like, maybe this wasn't, this was just an experiment, or wasn't our best. It's a B side. So that was circular. The interesting thing is that A side, it's important still, but only in K-pop, and it doesn't even mean, because we don't press records and send them to radio stations anymore. So imagine that. And so in K-pop, they still use the idea of B-side to refer to basically more or less everything except for what you intend to be the hit single when you release something, like the theme of the set of songs. Because what is nowadays the idea of these things is so changed because of digital recordings and just the way we distribute music and listen to music and stream music and the way radio works or doesn't work. It's just the whole thing, right? So the idea of A-side and B-side is mostly gone by the wayside, which is, that's a good jingle. Well, let me back it up just a bit. The importance of A-side is that when the physical copies of these records were sent to radio stations, when they were purchased by listeners, that's what would count for the Billboard charts, the hit charts of what the song. So the A side would be what would get the credit in the charts, not the B side. The B side was, again, thought of as an afterthought because there are two sides to the record, so why not? There are some examples with, like the Beatles or whatever, where a group might release a double A side. In other words, the DJ or the listener, and most importantly, the Billboard charts and the rankings for sales and all that, should regard both of the songs as the hit song. So that happened occasionally as well back in the olden days, where you'd have a double A side, where each side was considered an A side, not there's no B side. But B side has come to bite back in many cases. Well, not many, but enough cases that the idea of a B side becoming the real A side happened, to the chagrin of basically producers, not really nobody else. So let me give you a good example. Unchained Melody by the Righteous Brothers. You've probably heard this song. It was featured in that movie Ghost from many years ago, 24 years ago. And it starts, "Whoa, my love, my darling." Okay, that was the best I could do. That falsetto was horrendous. But as you know, as I told you in another episode, I can't get the pitch remotely right of a song unless I do it in the exact same octave that the song is sung in, which makes me ineligible to sing basically 99% of songs, except for the catalog of Johnny Cash and select Barry White songs. Only select, because Barry White had a hell of a range. Oh, Johnny Cash had a range too, but Barry White, you can't compete with that range. That's a range. So therefore only certain moments in Barry White songs can I sing. So that's how that goes. So you get treated to the falsetto again. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, what happened with Unchained Melody was that this is an older song from some movie years before, that it was recorded by the Righteous Brothers in the 60s. So the deal with Unchained Melody is that both of the members of the Righteous Brothers wanted to sing this song, so they flipped a coin. Their producer wasn't there. One of them played the keyboards, and the other sang based on the coin flip. And, it was just one of those moments perfect for a B-side. It's, that's how most B-sides work. And 99.9% of the time, the song on the A-side was far and away better and the hit and so forth. But there comes a time when the B-side gets to shine. And those little moments, like the one I just talked about, come through and are compelling to people. And just, they're the hit. And so this is what happened. DJs got this record, and they heard that B-side, and they played the B-side. The A-side, I don't even remember the name of what the song on the A-side was, but it was decidedly not a hit, and not the magical moment that Unchained Melody recorded on and pressed on that record. Oh, and the producer of the album, who's a very famous producer, flipped out because he really had nothing to do with this, and the A-side was what he was promoting. And so he would call up the radio stations and demand that the DJs play the A-side, but DJs weren't having any of it. And so it kept playing, and people loved it and still do love it. And so we have a shining example of a B-side being the hit, far and away, no competition. And that's important because thinking of that moment when Bill Medley and Bobby Hatfield made that recording, you see that moment of kind of randomness. It's perfect for our theme of the surreal becoming the real and the magical, because it was a moment where everything didn't seem to be as it normally was, and it became the moment that was cherished by millions upon millions of people. And that's a wonderful story. Oh, by the way, Bill Medley is an aptronym. Have you ever heard the term aptronym? It was coined a long time ago, and people like Carl Jung, the psychiatrist and founder of a whole discipline of psychology, have written some about it in terms of the way it works. And the idea is that people are likely to be attracted to professions and pursuits that sound like their names. So in this case, we have Bill Medley being a musician, and his last name is Medley, like a musical medley. So that's a good example. I look for examples all the time. And recently I saw one that I think is great. And for Italian speakers out there, maybe you will most appreciate this, but I'll explain it to everybody so everyone can understand and participate in the fun. So I saw an article about climate, and in it was quoted a scientist who is the European Union, one of the European Union's climate scientists, and the person's last name was Buontempo. Well, that's great, because buon tempo in Italian can mean, well, in English we'd say nice weather, good weather. So the fact that this person studied things to do with weather, meteorology, climatology, etc., makes some sense to me. But then again, there would be like 10,000 blacksmiths in England alone if aptronyms were really compelling. So let's just quote a friend of Carl Jung and say sometimes a name is just a name, or misquote a friend of Carl Jung. So how do you make your B-side your A-side? Well, let's ask the cards and see what they have to say. The bottom of the deck is Passions Are for Hobbies. We're not going to talk about it. All right. Oh, and if we draw it, then the episode will be over, so you'll know. As soon as I draw that, it will just cut off the mic, and that'll be the end of the episode, because I've drawn Passions Are for Hobbies too many times in the last few weeks. right, here we go. Afraid to even pick a card. It's card 39. Treat others' work as their possessions. We all have our jobs to do, and nothing is more annoying when unasked we take it upon ourselves to do someone else's work. By doing so, we're stealing away a little bit of accomplishment from that person. It's like having an annoying tennis doubles partner who poaches all of your shots. Be considerate and let others do their work. Now, consider the ways you have micro-poached someone else's work in any context. Figure out the real reason you preferred to do their work rather than your own. That's a good way of thinking about A-sides and B-sides. Because a lot of times we think something is our A-side, and if someone else is assigned that work or has to do that work or it's their thing to do, we do it anyway because we're like, well, I'm good at that. And then we do other people's work. And we ignore what we should be doing, which is the B-side, which is something that might be a weakness or just might be something we don't want to do. And by mixing it up, and saying, you know what, I am going to, even though that's a thing that I normally don't like to do or don't want to do, think about the Righteous Brothers switching off on who's singing and who's playing the keyboards. And the person who's playing the keyboards, that is not what they do. They are not a good keyboard player by their own admission. And yet it was a brilliant performance on keyboard on the record, and it was on the B-side. So normally that person would say, no, I don't do keyboards, get someone else to do the keyboards. But for this one moment, they did it. And that turned that B-side into an A-side. And in your life, it can too. Just remember that magical moment when two musicians flipped a coin to find out who would get to be the singer and who would have to play the keyboards. And remember that our B-side moments are sometimes the greatest A-side moments and the greatest hits that we will ever have.